Hi, my name is Dylan McClung, aka Deinococcus Rose, and today I'm going to tell you about how I combine the art form of drag with science communication. So I wanted to start by describing a little bit more about myself and how I got here today. So I got my Bachelor of Science in Biology from the College of New Jersey, and that's where I met Dr. Katie Elliott, our convener for this session. And I worked in her lab studying this protein called YQGF and its function in bacterial cells. That really sparked my passion for microbiology, and so I decided to pursue a PhD at the University of California, Berkeley. My project mainly surrounds this image here between these two bacteria. One is called Calceoplanus ceruleus on the left, or as I like to call her, Carol, and Actinoplanus duramensis on the right, or who I call Ashley. And when Carol and Ashley grow alone, they're totally fine, they're happy. But when they grow together on a petri dish, Carol doesn't like it, and she responds by producing an antibiotic, which is shown as this zone of clearance around the colonies. And it inhibits the growth of this third bacterium called Arthobacter globiformis. So my main questions in my PhD project were, what is this antibiotic? What is the identity? What is the chemical structure? So I found that out, and I named it after my drag persona. I named it Dynaplanin, Dyna for Deinococcus Rose, and Planin for Calceoplanus. My next question was, how is this antibiotic made? So really I'm asking, what genes does Carol use to produce the antibiotic? And then finally, how does it work? What is Dynaplanin doing that inhibits the growth or kills Arthobacter? And so all of my microbiology work, dominates a lot of my life, and it's something that I'm passionate about. So when I was thinking about a drag name, I wanted it to be a bacterial pun. So I got my drag name from Deinococcus radiodurans. It is a bacterial species that is actually in the Guinness Book of World Records for most radiation-resistant life form, which I think is so cool. And Dyna fits very well with Dylan. They're very similar names, so I felt like it suited me. And my last name, Rose, comes from my drag mother, Sendra Rose. So in drag culture, your drag mother is usually a mentor. So Sendra was the first person who put me into drag and got me started. Now, I imagine most people who are attending this talk already know what drag is, but in case you don't, drag is a performance art that usually surrounds gender. And it's grown to be a lot more expansive than that, basically any kind of visual performing art, but usually it captures some kind of gender space. And I like to think of it as theater, right? But I created the character, and I produced the performance, and I choreographed the performance, etc., etc. So I created the character of Dyna. And sometimes Dyna also plays additional characters, right? And so it's kind of this meta, complicated mess of a performance, but it's also very, very fun. You're seeing in this video me performing at a bar. This is a typical place to see a drag show, and I'm performing a science experiment in one of my favorite outfits, which is a lab coat dress that I created. And what I'm doing is incorporating lots of the many things that is part of drag. So lip syncing to music, performing in makeup, dancing, incorporating comedy, fashion, etc., etc. The list can go on and on and on, because there are a lot of different ways to perform in drag. And people often think of drag as just cross-dressing. So a man dressing as a woman would be a drag queen, and a woman dressing as a man would be a drag king. But in reality, those labels are not fully accurate for everybody, because there are some people who are non-binary who also perform in drag, or a trans man can still be a drag king, for example. But really the roots come from the fact that drag is a political statement in and of itself, right? Drag allows us to question gender roles, gender norms in terms of beauty, and what is a man allowed to do, what is a woman allowed to do, how is a woman supposed to look in order to be acceptable to society, right? So drag allows us to kind of break down what these things really mean and how important they really are to our well-being. And it's predominantly performed by people in the LGBTQ plus community, but it doesn't have to be, because drag is really for everybody. You can be a cisgender heterosexual person and totally participate in drag, as long as you're doing so respectfully and honoring the history of the drag community. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my personal journey with drag. I was born in 1993, coming out as this beautiful. No, I did not come out looking like this, but I was obsessed with lots of things that are popular in queer culture from an early age. So I was obsessed with The Wizard of Oz, specifically with Dorothy. I probably watched this movie well over 500 times. I still think it's an incredible movie today. And I wanted to be Dorothy when I was younger. So when I started making friends in school, I totally wanted to wear their princess dresses, and sometimes I did. But I learned from an early age that that was not allowed for a boy. I was not allowed to wear dresses because I was a boy. So you'll see here on my little timeline of life, this black bar, because I had to suppress my femininity in order to fit in to what society expected of me. But it wasn't all terrible during that time. I discovered American Idol, probably around season 3, and I wanted to be on American Idol so bad. But I found out in middle school that I am not a good singer at all. So the good thing for drag is that I get to lip sync all the music that I want. And I could have Beyonce's voice one day, or Christina Aguilera's voice, or Ariana Grande's. The possibilities are endless. And so I still get to live out my pop star fantasy, even though I can't sing at all. So then I went off to college at the College of New Jersey. And that's really where I started coming out. I started embracing my homosexuality. And that's when I discovered drag formally at our campus annual drag show. And I wanted to do it so badly, but I was so nervous about what everybody else was going to think. I was nervous about my parents finding out and what they would do. I was worried about my friends not wanting to be friends with me anymore because I was weird. So I kind of pushed it off until I came to grad school at UC Berkeley, one of the most liberal places in the world. And there's drag everywhere. So I started attending some local drag shows, and I decided after I passed my qualifying exam, I was gonna do drag. And I did. Here I have an image of me in the lab trying to practice walking in heels, but these were not lab safe. So I had to get creative and innovative, and that is the heart of drag. So you might be asking at this point in the talk, okay, but why am I combining science communication with drag in the first place? Well, the first and foremost important part is that I am embracing and celebrating my femininity. It is something that has been innate to me since I was a child. Before I really knew anything about gay, straight, masculine, feminine, I didn't really understand any of that. I didn't know what drag was, but I wanted to express my femininity in some way. And so drag allows me to do that in a way that is beautiful, in a way that makes me proud, in a way that makes me feel fierce, right? And it also is challenging the perception of what a scientist looks like, right? When we think about a scientist, most of us think about Einstein, right? A white man with frizzy hair who doesn't really dress well. And that is not true. There are so many different kinds of scientists. We all look so different. And I think it's important that we embrace all of those differences instead of putting people into a box and judging them for it. Also, I want to make science communication and education in general much more inclusive to out queer perspectives. I was thinking back to how many gay role models I had growing up, and I didn't have very many. The first teacher that I knew that was out and gay was Dr. Benny Chan at TCNJ. He's a chemistry professor. And then the next one was Dr. Matt Welch at UC Berkeley. And I ended up rotating in Matt Welch's lab, partially because I knew he was gay, and that would be a safe space for me to be my whole self when I was working as a graduate student. And so I think that finding those safe spaces and having those people is really important, especially when it is not always safe to be a queer person in America. But that was a serious note. Now I want to lighten it up a little bit. I also want to make science less scary, right? How many people have heard the phrase, "It's not rocket science"? Yeah, hello. Everybody has heard this phrase. And what this does, I think, is it sets up this idea that rocket science, and thus science in general, is kind of the pinnacle of knowledge, that this is the highest form, and everything else is more accessible. And I just don't believe that that's true. It's garbage. I truly believe in multiple kinds of intelligence, and that people who are historians are just as intelligent as me, a microbiologist. So I want to make science more approachable and less scary for anybody at any point in their life. And also to, if it's less scary and people approach it more, that can then improve people's appreciation for science and also scientific literacy. Especially, we're noticing right now that science is becoming significantly more politicized, whether we like it or not, right? Vaccinations, climate change, GMOs, the list goes on and on. And I think it's our job as scientists to make sure that we are accurately and understandably communicating our work and our knowledge to people who don't study this every day, so that they can make informed decisions when they're going to the voting booth, when they are deciding what to eat, when they're deciding what company to buy something from, right? So let's dive into the meat of the presentation, which is what I do as a drag science communicator. So I kind of broke this down into a couple of different types of events. So in person, that all happened pre-COVID, kind of traditional science talks and tabling, where I've added drag into traditional science-y spaces, and then social media content. And so I'll show you a short content and long version content of social media. So the first thing that I did with science communication formally was called the UC Berkeley Bear Slam. This was really what made my drag SciComm take off. Personally, it was a science communication competition, and there were three judging criteria. It had to be scientific, understandable, and entertaining. And so my first thought was, Dinah is entertaining. Hello, I want to do this. So I'll play you a little clip of that.
Hi, everybody. So as a drag queen, I have three very important interests. One is science, one is lip syncing to music, and the third is drama. So I am going to combine all three of those today for the talk.
Can you see that my makeup has improved a little bit? Yeah, a little bit. But this was a great start to my science communication career, and I ended up doing a version of this talk at an incredible event called Science is a Drag. And the first event was in Toronto, Canada. We had to give a research talk and also a performance of some sort, drag related, but one of the performers actually did burlesque. This was in a bar in the Gladstone Hotel. We got a little projector and a screen set up and a sound system. It was sponsored, this event, by RCI Science, and let me tell you, it was sold out. Like, the bar was completely packed. People wanted to hear drag performers talk about science, or scientists do drag, or both. I mean, it was so much fun. And one quote that really stuck out to me from an attendee was, if I learned science like that in school, I probably would have been more interested. And that is exactly why I do this, right? I want to engage with people who don't do science every day. I mean, if you are a scientist, yeah, still come to my show. I'll take your money. No, but I want people to enjoy science the way that I do. And obviously, not everybody is going to become a scientist. That's fine. But I want it to be more approachable. I want people to find it as fascinating as I do. It's just, there's so much to learn. It's so cool. So this was incredible. So another event that I did was at the California Academy of Sciences, which is a museum in San Francisco. And every Thursday they do a nightlife event. So it's a 21 and up event where there's alcohol, there are food trucks, and we get to explore the museum. There are sometimes tabling events and fundraisers. And so this particular event was for Pride, and it was all about painting and pigments and colors. So I collaborated with a very talented postdoc in our lab. Her name is Vinitha Zachariah, and she actually paints with bacterial pigments. So she is an actino artist. She freehand paints with a pigmented antibiotic called actinorodin, and it's produced by the bacterium called Streptomyces silicolor. And I'm super inspired by this work that she does. I think it's so cool. So we wanted to figure out how to incorporate this into a tabling event. So we had to think about safety, right? Not everybody who's coming to us is going to be a scientist. We had to think about how quickly somebody could draw or color, right? So we decided, actually I did a chemical extraction of this antibiotic, so that way they didn't have to interact with the bacteria at all. And then I resuspended that extract in a non-hazardous pH buffer, so that everybody, would be safe. But for added safety and for people's peace of mind, we also had gloves there for everyone. And then we figured that freehand painting might be a little stress-inducing, anxiety-inducing for somebody. I know I would be if I had someone watching me paint. So we had little images for people to color in with our different colored pigments. So we had blue, purple, and red, and I'll explain on the next slide why that was. But it was really fun. So we were thinking about what can we teach people while they're there. I mean, they're going to be here for maybe 5 minutes painting. So what can they gather about the science of this before they leave with their painting? So Vinitha talked a lot about the biology of Streptomyces, but I wanted to focus on the chemistry. So as I mentioned, actinorodin is a pigmented antibiotic. So it is either blue or red, depending on whether these oxygens here and here have a hydrogen attached or not. And so under basic conditions, there's no hydrogen at these positions. So the pigment appears blue to us. And under acidic conditions, they are reduced and the color appears red. So I did a little demo for everybody there. So it started with a blue pigment that I got out of an Eppendorf tube, and I ended up putting this into a pH buffer. And so what you'll see very shortly is that the pH buffer now looks red. Super exciting, right? So we can do that color change, it's very fast, and that was really fun. So we could also do a neutral pH, and we'd have approximately equal amounts of red and blue pigment. So it would appear purple. I also worked on some social media content, and so one of those was a competition called Science in 60 Seconds. This was a video submission to the World Congress of Science and Factual Producers. So I will show you that content now.
Hi, I'm Dinocockus Rose. I'm a drag queen and microbiologist. And unsurprisingly, I love drama. And it turns out there's drama all around us on the microbial scale. Because bacteria and other microbes can talk to one another, they just use a chemical language to do it. I study bacteria that live in the soil. Two species, Countioplanes ceruleus and Actinoplanes duramensis, or Carolyn Ashley for short, don't seem to get along, when they're grown on a petri dish.
Ugh, who booked you for the show?
I know you're not talking to me with your flat hair.
Excuse me? Girl, please. I have way more talent than you do. Let's
Okay, girl.
settle this with a
Bring
dance off.
it.
Making fun of my hair? Yours doesn't want to stay on.
Ooh, drama! Carol won that one by producing an antibiotic against Ashley. It turns out this is a brand new antibiotic. I wonder what other conversations are happening out there.
So this was a really fun video to make, but it was also super challenging because we were not allowed to have any copyrighted material, which is very difficult for a drag queen because we sing lip sync other people's songs, right? Obviously copyrighted. So that was the first challenge that I had to overcome, was completely have a script that was my own. The second was this was now all of a sudden in COVID times. So I had to do all of this myself. I got a green screen because I wanted to impersonate bacteria. And so I also tried out different characters, which was really cool. You know, when you're performing on stage, there's only one of you, so you can only really play one person. So it was very fun to try out playing a bunch of different personalities all at the same time. But was really challenging trying to line up all of that dialogue by myself. So this was really fun, and the feedback that I got was that there actually wasn't enough science. And at first I thought, excuse me? And then, actually, yeah, you're right. I was so focused on the metaphor, on the drag, on branding myself as the drag queen, that I forgot why I'm doing science communication. Right? I need to communicate the science. And so that's something that I want to take with me moving forward with any kind of short content that I'm working on. And so I did utilize that information for this long content that I like to call Conjugation, a Bacterial Love Story. And so I produced this for an event called Science is a Drag UK. This was a virtual event. And it was actually inspired by my boyfriend. He's an accountant, not a scientist. And he was asking me what I'm doing in lab. I was doing a lot of conjugations at this point. And so I was explaining that this was, basically bacterial sex. And he asked me if I played music for them to get them in the mood. And so that really inspired me to actually just create an entire performance on what I'm doing, what I know really well. So I also utilized green screen and multiple characters. So I had Dinah, the mad scientist. She was, controlling the experiment. I had Eric, the E. coli, Stephanie, the streptomyces, and DNA, the DNA that needed to be transferred, right? And so this is about a 9-minute video. It's available on YouTube. Obviously, I'm not going to play it all today, but basically I go through the process of conjugation, the protocol, to music, to pop culture, and I think it was really fun. This was by far one of my favorite performances, I think partially because of the amount of work that went into it, but also because the finished product is, I think, a perfect representation of who I want to be as a drag queen. I incorporate comedy, I'm impersonating bacteria, and science is clearly the focus here. And I tried a lot of different things with makeup, and I got to play with gender. I got to also impersonate a drag king, or be a drag king, which is not something I normally do. So I think it's really fun to be able to play around with all of these different characters and combine them into one really cool performance. There was a lot of editing, let me tell you, lots of editing. So this was something I was not expecting. I need to work on my procrastination and my time management in the future. But it was honestly totally worth it, like I said before. This also allowed me to reflect on the fact that this event was in line with LGBTQ+ in STEM Day. And this is all about, being out and proud, being in the STEM community. And it made me think about the fact that when I was in college, I really wanted to be the scientist who happened to be gay, because I wanted my work, my merit to speak for me and my gayness to not be factored into that. And I was afraid that me being gay would detract from potential job opportunities, from being taken seriously as a scientist. And I have to say, I think that that's garbage now. I really do. Now I am very happy to say that I am the gay scientist. I am the drag queen scientist, because what I do doesn't take away from my merit. And if people can't see that, that's their problem. I'm so happy where I am in my life, and I can't wait to do more. So with that, where am I going with Drag SciComm? So I definitely want to add, continue to add drag into science spaces. And so in that case, I'm really thinking about social media science communication. So having a kind of preview of a full length video, something that's 30 to 60 seconds for TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, something that's short content, digestible content. But I definitely want to remember that I need to pay attention to the science, right? What's one fact that this viewer could get if they only watched this video? And then, I want to have some more time to develop a 5 to 10 minute video. That could be something for YouTube that's a little more in depth. But I also want to continue adding science into traditional drag spaces, because I think this is an underrepresented audience when we're talking about science, the drag community, the queer community in general. So going to a bar and a club and performing like I do, you don't think about learning when you're going to a drag show. But I think what that proved from Science's Drag Toronto is that people didn't realize that they were learning. They were just having fun. And that's something that I want to foster even more in my drag performances. And again, engaging people with science who wouldn't necessarily seek it out. So I hope that you will, continue to follow me, but if you don't, I'm not the only one who's doing this. So I wanted to give a shout out to some other drag science communicators out there. These are some of my favorites. Analytical is a computer scientist. Polynation is a bee ecologist. Big Drag Mike does a lot of work with sustainability and climate change. And Sassy Science, or Mario, is a physicist. So I want to thank the Traxler Lab, the lab that I come from, for all of their support. I also have to thank my boyfriend, Stuart, for supporting me at every step of the way. And then my drag family, my drag mom, Sandra, and my second mom, my stepmom, Ava Lachey, and some other friends from the drag scene. Thank you to Dr. Katie Elliott for convening this session and selecting me for this talk, and ASM and FEMS for hosting this entire conference. Thank you so much. And thank you all for listening. Please feel free to connect with me on any of my social media platforms. I have a lot of them. And feel free to send me any questions that you might have about drag, about SciComm, if you want to collaborate on something, about Dinaplanin, my antibiotic. I'm happy to talk about whatever. Thank you so much. Have a great day.